What influenced you to run for the State Board of Education? And why are you running for re-election?
I practiced dentistry here in Pampa for 43 years and really enjoyed it. And I retired in 2018, and I thought I was done with most of my activities. I'd been on the school board, but I thought I was through with all that too. And then a good friend of mine who was our state representative here for a long time, Warren Chisholm, came, and Warren said, "You ought to do that State Board of Education." And I said, "No, I'm retired." Then I went to church a few days later, and my pastor, Byron Williamson, said the same thing. And I said, "Have you been talking to Warren Chisholm?" And he said, "No, but it's something you really should do." And so I gave it some thought and talked about it with my wife. And here I am after serving my first term, in the middle of my first term. The reason that I'm running again so soon is I anticipated a 4-year term, but because Texas just went through redistricting, we have to be reelected by the district that we will represent. So that's the reason that my term was only 2 years and not 4 years.
What training, experience, and background qualify you for this position?
Well, in the early 1980s, I served on the city commission, so I got some experience at that kind of training as far as being involved in the city commission and the way the rules and laws were taken care of there. And then later on, I became involved in the 80s in some long-term planning for the school district. The superintendent invited me to be a part of their long-range planning. And then in the 90s, my kids were growing up, and I decided to take a bid at the Pampa School Board, and I did that for 9 years. So in the mid-2000s, I was done with that, and I got off the board. And then in about 2010 or 11, I got a call from some members on the board and asked me if I would accept an appointment back on the board because they were looking for some help with hiring a new superintendent, and I had been through that already a couple times, so they thought I could be beneficial. So I did that, and then I stayed on the board for a couple more terms, and I went off the board in 2018, right about the time I retired, and thought I was done with it, but like I say, there's always one more thing to do. Also, after I retired, immediately after I retired, there was an opportunity to serve on the Career and Technical Education Long-Range Committee for the Pampa School District, and I served on that. So I had a lot of experience, not to mention being on the PTA and the booster clubs and things like that for my children during those times. So I had quite a bit of experience with education and educators, and it really has benefited me well.
Can you tell us more about District 15?
District 15 in Texas on the Texas State Board of Education is a huge area. It's nearly 1/3 of the state geographically. It includes all the Texas Panhandle, Amarillo, Lubbock, Odessa, Midland, San Angelo, Abilene, and back up to Wichita Falls. When I first got elected, it was only 77 counties, but because of redistricting, I lost 3 counties over to the east past Wichita Falls, and I gained 13 more counties to the south and west of the area down between Midland, Odessa, and San Angelo. So now I have a total of 87 counties in my district. I have a colleague who has 1/3 of Harris County in his district, so I do a little more traveling than he does.
Charter schools have been in the news a lot. What's the difference between a charter school and a public school in Texas?
With public schools, everybody's pretty much aware of. The public schools are funded by the state and also the local taxing effort that goes into funding those. The charter schools are funded by the state because they don't have a tax base, so they don't have any revenue from tax. The charter schools were begun in about 1996, and they were begun with the idea that it'd be kind of an experiment to see what other innovations in education could come along that would benefit the whole Texas public education. There is no charge to go to a charter school. Charter schools are free, no tuition, just like all public schools, but the funding is a little different. Funding for a charter school requires about 20% of the budget, and only about 6.7% of the students in Texas participate in charter schools. That's about 362,000 kids are doing that. It doesn't affect Region 15 very much because our district doesn't have a lot of charter schools. Of that 362,000, only less than 6,000 attend in this area. They tend to be more in the larger cities, in the areas where they are necessary. I am a proponent of charter schools where they are needed and where they're necessary. Lots of times some families are trapped in an area of a non-performing school, and a charter school may be their only option. So in that case, I think it's a great thing. I don't like to see a charter school go into an area where it's not really needed, where the public school is being successful. That's not the place where charter schools need to be. One other thing about charter schools is the expansion of charter schools. The State Board of Education has the privilege to approve or veto charter schools once the commissioner approves them. This past year, the commissioner started out with 27 charter school applicants. They immediately disqualified several because they didn't have their applications complete. Then it went down to 18, and they did a little more research and study and pared that down to 12 charter applications. After they went through what we call capacity interviews that were 2 hours each, so there was 12 of those, so we spent 24 hours watching the interviews with the charter school applicants. Then the commissioner and his committee narrowed it down to 7 more. Then those 7 came to the State Board of Education, and we interviewed them and took testimony for 2 days for another 24 hours. And then we had a lot of studying to do before then about their applications. So we spent a lot of time studying and researching the information about charter schools. So we're looking for serious contenders when we give a charter to any school district in the state. The charter schools can expand, and when they expand, we don't have a say in that. The State Board of Education is done with it once they either veto or approve. And at that point, the commissioner can expand a charter school based on increasing campuses for one charter. They can increase enrollment for a charter. They can increase the number of grade levels, or they can increase the geographic boundaries of a charter school. And right now there are 175 charter owners in Texas and 795 campuses with that 362,000 students. So that's kind of the story about charter schools.
What do you see as the parent's role in public education?
The parent's role is primary. If the parent is involved in the child's education, the child always does better. Parental involvement is something that I always wished we had more of when I served on the local school board. It's never a thing that can be threatening. I'm really kind of pleased about all the national attention that parental involvement received in the Virginia governor's election last year. I think that kind of poked the bear, and I think parents are more aware. And I think that's going to improve education because parents now know some of the things that can be improved. They're looking for improvement in that situation. Parents are not domestic terrorists. That was such a bad situation that it turned into that. But I do think it was really positive that parents have been awakened now. There can be issues on a local school board where parents become unruly and even threatening, but they're not terrorists, but they're upset about things that are happening to their children. But the good thing about that is that's not something for a federal department to take care of. That's something for your local law enforcement or just your school officers to take care of. So that's not an answer that would ever, I think, fit a situation for a local school board. You know, parents can't write the curriculum, they're not qualified for that, but parents do have a lot of opportunities, especially in the new laws in Texas. Parents have the right to opt in to courses on sex education, health, and other things like that that they may not want their children to participate in. So now the law has been changed from the opportunity to opt out to the opportunity to opt in. So I think that will give parents a lot more authority on the things that their kids are taking during school.
What is your opinion on healthcare, diagnosis, or treatment, mental, reproductive, or otherwise, being given to a child without written consent from the parent?
That's wrong. We just can never allow that. If a parent is not notified about whatever a diagnosis, a treatment, or anything like that, that's just not right. We just recently went through a textbook review. Now we call it instructional material because it's not always textbook anymore. But with the instructional material, some of the things we looked at and rejected were because the wording in the book may have said, be sure and visit with a trusted adult. Didn't even mention your parent, which we thought was really a wrong thing to do. So that was corrected and changed to visit with your parent about those type things. A trusted adult may be somebody you would want to talk to, but we felt like the first person to turn to in every situation for health care and those type of issues, whether it's mental or physical or some disease, we want the kids to talk to their parents. We want parents to be aware of what's going on, and we certainly wouldn't want any kind of treatment done without written consent of the parent.
Do you feel that the 10 Commandments should be allowed to be displayed in a public school?
Of course they should be. And even if we didn't call them the 10 Commandments, what could be wrong upon a sign on the wall that says don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat? Those are just good rules to live by. Now, I'm not advocating that we take down the word 10 Commandments, but the 10 Commandments, I don't care what religion that you are involved in, the 10 Commandments are moral. They just are things that are good guiding principles. So why would we want to take those away from students? We should encourage those. Certainly the teachers are encouraging their students to be honest and to take care of each other. That's just the way we need to treat people in the school setting, in public education, and around town, wherever we are.
How do you feel about high school athletes competing by the gender with which they identify instead of biological sex?
Of course, biologic males should not compete with biologic females. God made us differently, and those males have different bone structures. They've got more muscle mass. There are just a lot of reasons. I don't care what kind of hormone therapy they've had. God made us differently, and I don't think that He ever intended, or we should have ever allowed it to get to the situation where we have males competing with females. I have the same attitude about restrooms. I think the males go to the boys' restroom and the females go to the girls' restroom. I just can't believe that we've ever gotten to this point.
How would you describe yourself?
Well, I would describe myself as a common sense, conservative Christian. I think that having grown up in the West Texas area, in the Panhandle where I have, I'm lucky that I've grown up here, and I'm proud to be from here. We have a different mindset here, and I think it's a real good mindset of honesty and treat your neighbor well and abiding by the golden rule. So I think that I would call myself a common sense Christian conservative.
What is your opinion about mask mandates and vaccination mandates?
Well, I am not an anti-vaxxer. I think if you want to get a vaccination, it's probably a good idea. My wife and I both have, and I had COVID after that. But I had a minor case, and I was very fortunate. But I think that it's a good idea, but I don't think it's anywhere in the government's list of things that they're qualified to do is tell people what kind of medical treatment they should have. So I'm very opposed to any vaccination mandates, and I feel the same way about mask mandates. I think it's been pretty much proven that cloth masks, and if you don't have a high quality mask, you're probably not doing yourself much good unless you're coughing or spitting on somebody. That might hold that back a little bit, the splatter factor. But as far as the virus, when I was in microbiology way back when, they told us that putting a low quality mask on in the environment of virus was sort of like trying to keep a BB from going through a tennis net. So I think that we should realize that that masks may prevent some splatter, but they don't prevent the virus unless it's high quality. So I think we let people make those own decisions. Let's let people decide for themselves the thing about their health care.
What do you think about all the discussion of critical race theory?
Critical race theory is a form of indoctrination. I just don't believe that my 6-year-old granddaughter, who is the sweetest thing I've ever seen, could be an oppressor. Nor do I think that she would have a friend that might not be the same skin color as she is, that she would make that person feel oppressed. I think we've just gone over the edge on those kind of things. And I'm really excited about the fact that the State Board of Education will have an opportunity to rewrite our social study TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, because the law changes that the Texas legislature put in place in 2021, which says critical race theory cannot and will not be taught in Texas public schools. So I'm glad about that. That'll be a part of what I'll spend a lot of my time in 2022 doing, is helping to rewrite the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. Martin Luther King made a big point that our lives are all about our character and not about the color of our skin. I think everybody who had a lot of confidence in him still believes that and still thinks that. I actually had an opportunity to visit with Dr. Ben Carson not long ago, and he said, where would I be if my mother had bought into that idea that I was oppressed and I could never get out of my victimhood. The Declaration of Independence said all men are created equal, and I think that's where we're getting in the United States. I know we've had lots of bad things that the United States has been guilty of. We've all got warts, but where in the world is a better place to live than Texas and the United States? As a matter of fact, as I've been going around campaigning, I bought a bunch of books from an author in Amarillo named Dr. Mary Dodson, and she wrote a book. It's called Critical Race Theory versus God's Divine Law. And I would recommend, if you have an opportunity to pick that book up, it's a real easy read. But as I go around the state discussing things about public education, the question about critical race always comes up. And I say the same thing I just said, but I'll usually give people an opportunity to have one of the books I'm passing out. So I think critical race theory is something we have to be sure to keep out of our school systems, out of our curriculum. We want to be sure that it doesn't sneak in through other things other than social studies. So that will be a part of our job this year, is taking care of making sure that critical race theory is not a part of Texas public education.
What are your goals for your next term?
We always have to strive for improvement. One of my goals, most of my practice of dentistry, was a little saying called CANI, and it stands for constant and never-ending improvement. I think all of us want to improve at whatever we're doing. And I see, as a State Board of Education member, I want us to improve the opportunities for children in Texas to receive the best possible education. We have a real challenge now because of the learning gaps that were caused by COVID. Can you imagine if you were a first grader and you missed half of 2021 and then the first half of 2022? The grade schoolers had lost about 5.7 months of learning at the beginning of the year. You can't make that up very quickly, and it's hard for us to think of ways to accelerate learning, so we have to improve some methods and procedures to make that happen. We don't want our kids to be behind 5, almost 6 months when they graduate. We want them to catch up. The federal government has given a lot of money to that very purpose, to increase the closing the gap during COVID. So a lot of money has gone into that. Another thing I like to do is be sure that we don't take away authority from the local school boards. We want them to control what they do. I don't see any reason for us in Austin to say, okay, here's what you need to do in Pampa, Texas, or in Texline or Dalhart. They don't have the same things that are needed there that they have in the inner city of Houston. We need to let local boards control their local issues. That's one thing I'd like for us to always work towards. Another thing is, we have a big calendar next year, or big events scheduled for the TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, with our social study program. I had the good fortune to find a retired professor from Texas Tech that's going to be one of our content advisors. He is a very conservative man. I'm excited about having him serve. I've also been able to approve several teachers and parents and people involved in this District 15 that were interested and wanted to serve as on the work groups. So with the work groups working together with the content advisors, I think we can really improve the curriculum for social studies for 2022. Another important thing about that is the textbooks that are written for Texas students go all across the country. So we have a chance to not only influence Texas students, but if we do this correctly and do a great job, we can influence the whole country, and that excites me. We have that opportunity. So I'm looking forward to that for 2022.
Who makes up the State Board of Education, and what are the primary responsibilities of the board?
The Texas State Board of Education is made up of 15 members. The state has almost 30 million people in it now. They divided the 30 million by 15, so it gives each district approximately 2 million people. Well, up here where I live, you've got to draw a big circle to find those 2 million people. But there's 15, and we're spread out all across the state. We come together, like I say, at least 5 times a year to talk about issues. But our chairman is a great chairman, good leader. He's a chiropractor from Lufkin, Texas. We're blessed to have a man like him leading our State Board of Education. One of the primary responsibilities of the State Board of Education is to select curriculum, and curriculum anymore is, most of it's done digitally, because students are all using their Chromebooks or their iPads, but that's one of our big responsibilities. Then the other one is to write the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. Another one of our functions is we oversee the Permanent School Fund, which is $49 billion. Now, we don't invest that personally. There is a large staff of people on the Texas Education Agency that oversee that, but the State Board of Education sort of oversees that. We have a fiduciary responsibility to take care of that $49 billion. I think that's a huge responsibility, but I'm glad that it's not our responsibility to personally invest it. We also oversee initiatives. Initiatives are like special purpose school boards. Some of the places that have special purpose school boards are some of the military installations. Some of the universities have special purpose school boards. One locally here is Boys Ranch. It has a special purpose school board. We oversee those, and we approve the appointments that they give us, that they bring to us for those things. We do some school board training. We oversee that for the school boards. We oversee the State Board Educator Certification Group, and we also see the charter school applications. We help write those and change those as they are reviewed annually. It's a variety of things, but the most important thing by far is the curriculum with the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. I am very honored to serve and do those things, and I really am flattered that I have this opportunity.
What about serving on the Board of Education was what you thought it might be, and what were some of the surprises?
Well, I may have had more surprises than what I thought it would be, but it takes a lot of time out of my schedule. I would not want this job if I were still raising a family, because when I'm home, and I'm gone at least 5 weeks out of the year, but when I'm home, I'm studying a lot. There's so much material to learn, so much information to absorb. It just takes a lot of time. I didn't anticipate that. I didn't anticipate that a board book before a meeting might be 950 pages. Our book was back in September. It just takes a lot of time to prepare and do your homework. I wouldn't want this job if I had little ones running around. I'd rather be playing with them. So I think the fact that I'm in a position in my life with the experiences I've had and with the time that I have the opportunity to serve the state like I do. My wife might not vote for me because she says, "Where are you going this time? And what are you doing in your study all the time?" So I'm trying to win her vote, but I'm enjoying this, and I think it's where I need to be right now.